Awesome. So thanks for tuning in today, guys, on Influencing the Shift 3.0. Today we're here with Mark from Sport in Nova Scotia. And today we're going to be talking about funding in relation to sport sector and inclusion access. I have Gina as my co-host today. If you want to say hi, Gina, and you can get us rolling.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today we have Mark Smith joining us. Mark, do you want to give us a little bit of your background and the role you're playing right now with Sport Nova Scotia?
Certainly, Gina. My role is the Director of Sport for Sport Nova Scotia. So I have the pleasure of working with Gina along with 5 of her counterparts across the province that work out of community, culture, tourism, and heritage offices and sort of handle the sport file within the respective regions that they work in, supporting community sport organizations who are members of provincial sport organizations who are the groups that we serve in the city. In addition to that, within our department, we have participation leads who work directly with provincial sport organizations across a number of services that they offer to their members. We also have coaching leads. We have a parasport coordinator who targets and focuses on the disabled sport community in the province to provide programming and funding opportunities to assist disabled community. And most recently, because of our conversation here today, we have delved into the EDI world in terms of looking at how we can help to create more opportunities for underrepresented groups and equity deserving groups to be able to more fully participate in sport.
Great. And Mark, we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about this new EDI funding pot as well as the parasport funding.
Certainly. The opportunity to increase funding came from, or was born out of an ask made by the province last year in March when the Premier at the time, Ian Rankin, met with Sport Nova Scotia and identified that the province felt that it was time to ratchet up their commitment to EDI and sport in the province, and Sport Nova Scotia were going to be the benefactors of that in terms of developing criteria as well as an approach to being able to deliver the funding. So we sort of embarked on a process of, first of all, looking at criteria and how could we, be able to distribute the money in a meaningful way, but also an accountable way so that we were hopefully building on to existing opportunities or creating opportunities that had the ability or potential to be sustainable long-term. So it took us, quite honestly, probably about 6 to 8 months to sort of sort through, first of all, the various funds that were the type of funding programs that we already offer and where were there consistencies and where was it different to make sure that we weren't being redundant, but then also through the expertise of our regional staff to talk about what types of challenges that they see in regions and how could we shape the funding criteria to ensure that we were going to be as inclusive as we possibly can. Probably November, we settled on a first draft of what that should look like, and the funding started to be allocated or published to groups to apply for in December. We've had very good uptake with the para community thus far. I think I most recently looked today, we had 10 applications that we have approved and funded since December. Things are starting to trickle in with on the Sport Fund EDI side. I think we have 4, applications now for funding that are under consideration. The intention of the program, quite simply, is simply to use the resources to allow these particular populations of people to be more inclusive in sport and to have greater accessibility to sport. So, for example, on the para side, it is looking at, in most cases, pre-existing programming to say, how do we help you grow your programming to allow more participants to be able to take part? Often that comes in the form of volunteers and in equipment, because often the equipment used by the para community needs to be specialized equipment. So looking at how we can help increase opportunities for people to participate. On the able-bodied EDI side or sport fund side, it's really been about looking at groups who want to do things within community, within sport, and haven't had a lot of opportunities. So we've worked with a squash group in the Annapolis Valley that have an African Canadian squash program that are partnered with a group or the club in Kentville. but simply wanted the opportunity for these students to be able to learn the sport of squash and be members of a club and go in and actually train and participate and become full-fledged members of that community, and therefore become comfortable with the travel, comfortable with the going into the club and booking courts and playing with different people. So we've seen some success where that's been concerned so far. We've had most recently from Gina's region, a Challenger baseball application that's put in around, which is in many, it's disabled sport in terms of people being able to play baseball that are in wheelchairs or unable to function fully. And so we are looking at being able to support that type of a program. We have a few other programs or opportunities where people have come forward and looked for funding that will allow them to access facilities. The interesting thing about the funding is that there's sort of no one size that fits all. Some of it is about access to facilities that historically people couldn't gain access to. Some of it's about access to equipment that they need to be able to actually participate. And in other cases, it's access to just the opportunity to participate. So I know I want to participate in this particular activity, but I don't know how I go about opening that door, creating that relationship. And one of the things that's been most beneficial of our regional staff is the relationship building component that they live on in their communities around connecting with, whether it be other sport organizations or recreation departments or standalone facilities in communities where we can use to deliver sport activities. And so our regional staff are fundamental in the delivery of this because they are the ones historically that built the relationships, and it allows them to help direct the applicants to where they can hopefully have the greatest potential to be successful.
I love that. I love everything you just said. That's amazing. And I think it's great to have that kind of opportunity presented and without these, sometimes like when you have a grant, there are these boundaries within it. So to have something where you're recognizing, not one size fits all. So there's opportunity to have that flexibility with this application. It's very unique in some ways, I would say. And it kind of leads into this other question we have around, you're recognizing that the EDI has had a bit of a slower uptake. When creating this grant opportunity, were there specific types of projects or certain types of groups that you were hoping you would see in applications for the EDI funding?
Well, our hope is that, of course, it's the full cross-section of Nova Scotians, from African Nova Scotian to Indigenous communities, LGBTQ+, low-income Nova Scotians and newcomers, women and girls. These are our target groups. And I would say that thus far, we are seeing applications from those groups. One of the biggest challenges when new funding comes about, really even for our provincial sport organizations, our mainstream funding, is that oftentimes they don't know the funding's available. They're told about it and it's on the website, or somebody lets them know, there's an email that comes along. But as far as truly understanding how to take full advantage of it, how to connect with other partners around being able to expand their scope and deliver programming in different regions, that's really where our expertise comes in. So, for example, we've got a swim program that we fund in North Preston. That's an elementary school age group who are now bused to the Darkness Sportsplex, where they take swim lessons twice a week over 20 weeks, and they receive a swim certificate for doing so. Historically, there has been a challenge for those groups in communities such as North Preston to feel comfortable in going into what I would refer to as sort of mainstream society without being judged or stereotyped or made to feel less than. So they simply choose not to participate. And so what we've been able to do with that particular initiative is bring folks from the City of Halifax Recreation, along with folks who run the community programming in North Preston, together to say, you have a pool and instructors, they have a population of kids that want to learn how to swim. How do we create an opportunity for both groups to be able to work together? Fortunately, on this side of the city, they have been looking for ways to create inroads into the African Nova Scotian community to run programming and haven't always had great success. So we were able to actually broker a relationship that is now going into its second year with, I think, now upwards of 60 children that are getting what I consider to be a life skill by learning how to swim. And we've also, I think, created an awareness on both sides around there are partners out there that want to work with groups and in a very non-judgmental, very supportive, very inclusive way. And so we've sort of helped to create that type of an opportunity. As a result of that, we have another program in North Dartmouth that is an underrepresented population that has now become involved in the swim program because they too want that opportunity to provide, and it's a female only program, which is another demographic that we know historically has been underrepresented and underserved. So we're seeing, even in the few programs or initiatives that have come forward since December, we're seeing that very much the groups that we had hoped to engage, they are engaged. And it's really through the expertise of our regional staff and I think our network of people within sport that has allowed us to connect groups with opportunities and then help to kind of facilitate or broker those opportunities that turn into programs.
That's a kudos to you, Gina.
It's fun getting to know all these community groups, and yeah, if you're tuning in, get in touch. And I guess we should mention that. So on the website, there's description about the target audience for this funding, and then also kind of who to connect with in each region to start an application or just hear more. And so that would be the way to get started. So Mark, as Sport Nova Scotia, as an organization that works with various sports, why was it important to create these funding opportunities for these specific groups?
Well, I think historically, Gina, we've always known that there's been a lack of focus on being able to really target, in some cases, the most needy in terms of sport opportunities. It's been a matter of, the resources to be able to do that in a very intentional way. And what the Premier of the day had done is really shone the light on the need. What we're certainly looking to do is to demonstrate to the province over the course of the next year that this is funding that needs to continue to exist. We were told it was one-time funding, so the commitment has been made that here's a parcel of money, here's the groups that we want you to focus on, but when the money's gone, it's gone. And one of the things I asked the Premier at the time was, if we can demonstrate there's a need for this funding, are you committed to looking at how we can continue to receive this money? And I was told yes. Now there's a new Premier, so that's a different ask, but I do feel that we will be able to make a very strong case for why it's important. And when you look at the province in scope, and when you look at the groups that it's designed to support, I had a conversation with somebody from the Indigenous community last week who are looking to deliver a program that would be delivered in most of the reserves around the province. And so already we're talking about an opportunity to create something that's provincial in scope to support program delivery to an underrepresented group. So I think by the time we're done with this, we will see where we have created an opportunity that has done a lot of great things for sport, but most importantly, Nova Scotians who deserve the opportunity to participate in sport. And it'll be something that the provincial government will not only be proud of, but I think proud to continue to support.
Yeah, and I think, like, to your point earlier too, just listening to you speak, like, we encourage, community organizations to find community partners to build a more sustainable route. And perhaps, that's something that in the future, like, if we want to see this funding and these opportunities, like, as more, provincial organizations, like, almost modeling that same thing, like, who are the partners to ensure that, in a year's time, if we want this continuing funding, who are those partners that we would want to be invest in that as well, almost. So I think there's an abundance of opportunities that can come from this demonstration of, like, need and want from our partners.
I think for too long, we've just, for no particular reason, we've just had a very siloed effect or approach to delivery. We live in sport, somebody else lives in recreation, somebody else lives in physical activity, education sits over here by itself. And only when we've needed very specific things from one another have we picked up the phone or sent an email or knocked on the door and said, can you help me? And the reality is that we're all playing in the same sandbox. We're just in different corners of the sandbox. And at the end of the day, we know that, for example, with community services, a large part of the demographic that we're looking to serve also is part of a demographic that they're looking to serve. We know that, at the end of the day, if you want underrepresented groups to feel comfortable, then you have to go to where they are and you have to use some of the connects and contacts they have within communities. So I think we're marrying a number of things together that truthfully probably should have been done a very long time ago. But we're now at least in a place where we've got more people talking about what is possible and looking to collaborate and work together on what's possible. And, the benefactors of that will be people in this province that participate in these programs.
Yeah, there's definitely no instruction manual to this work. So I think like just starting and just, trial and erroring and creating these opportunities is a great place to start personally. So thank you for, putting the time and energy into this. So, aside from the financial support that this grant, Sport NS is really providing to organizations in terms of creating inclusive opportunities, I'm curious, not being as familiar with Sport NS, have you identified other supports that are needed from the community sport sector in order to successfully provide inclusion to persons specifically with disability? And how do you see the future of Sport NS really playing a role in moving forward the initiative around inclusion and access for persons with disability in community sports specifically?
Well, partnerships are one of the things we do, I think, very well as an organization. And historically, we have built relationships with what would be considered non-traditional partners over the years, because we don't only look at it from a sport perspective, but it's a health perspective. Like, what are the things we can do that just create healthier Nova Scotians? And while we believe very strongly that sport can play a significant role in that, sometimes it's helping other groups recognize how sport can actually play a role. I can remember many years ago when I first started with Sport Nova Scotia, we would be sitting at tables with the Department of Health. And I can remember people at that table raising their eyebrows and going, well, why is sport here? And thinking to myself at the time, well, what better way to be healthy than to be physically active through sport? Like we are a stress reliever. We are a place where you can go and do things that are good for your body, good for your mind, good for your spirit, and will allow you to come back reinvigorated and a better employee or a better parent or a better husband or a better whatever the case. So I often wondered how people couldn't make the connect between why sport would be a determinant of health, physical and mental. And so now 20 years later, we're finally in a place where we've connected those dots. But I think what we have historically done and will continue to do is to seek out those partnerships and those relationships and bring others to the table who may not initially appreciate or understand the value or the benefit of the partnership, and then be able to demonstrate them through both past history and future programming how we can be helpful, how we can help support. North Preston, they talked about wanting to teach kids to swim. We were the ones that said, well, if kids need to learn to swim, they need lessons. And if they need lessons, it needs to be in a formal way. And if it needs to be in a formal way in this province, it needs to be in a pool, because you can swim 3 months a year otherwise. So you just start to look at, well, what is the need? And then who best meets the need? And then you sit the partners down and talk about what each group really needs to get from this relationship. And then from that, relationships grow. This started as a one-time only, let's take a group in and see how it looks. And we're now going into year 2 with a third group. And both parties are saying, we hope they're able to support this forever, because we feel that we know there's a need, and both parties are fully invested in making it happen. And I suspect that that's what's going to happen across this province with all of the programs we run, that it'll become very clear that A, we should have been doing this a long time ago. B, we can't afford not to be doing it on a go forward, because we see the benefits of it. And C, because it will directly and indirectly impact the health of Nova Scotians, both physically and mentally.
That's amazing. No, yeah. And I think you're right. Partnerships and having just those conversations and sounds like to me like Sport NS is really taking the lead on helping to create those spaces to have those conversations and see where those opportunities to build together are. And I think that's half the battle sometimes, is like you said at the beginning, like, I think that sometimes we aren't aware of all the other community partners in our community that are doing this work. So just kind of saying, hey, did you talk to so-and-so? Did you, in making those connections and pieces, I think that's vital. And then once that communication and that relationship has been built, that trust, like you said, has been built, some beautiful outcomes can happen. So to your point,
I think historically, Cassie, one of the bad reps that sport takes at a competitive level is being overly competitive. That sport, there's a side to sport that isn't for everybody, and I appreciate that. That if you're a highly competitive individual, there's elements of sport that you're going to be attracted to, that somebody that wants to just show up once or twice a week and participate. Very different environment. But one of the things that sport teaches us, as we've been exposed to it, it's about chasing down dreams, and it's about taking initiative, and it's about not being afraid to stick your neck out. And so where I give kudos to our organization in particular and our staff is that we're not afraid to stick our neck out. We're not afraid to pick up the phone and make a call and talk to somebody we don't know in the service of creating an opportunity for many people that we know will support a community. And so I'm proud of that, because I think we take initiative where others may wonder about it or be curious about it. We actually put that curiosity into action, and we'll make a phone call and we'll ask a question and we'll bring groups to the table. And the benefits of that are that more Nova Scotians are able to participate in sport opportunities for the benefit of their own health. And I think we've done a pretty good job in this province of sort of driving that bus.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I love this. I love this conversation. It's motivating because I think too, like you speak to something that I always kind of struggle with in terms of like language. Like when you say sport, you're absolutely right. Like I think of elite sport all the time, right? And I think sport is so much more than that. And I think that's where there's this kind of gray area, I'll call it, between recreation and sport, because I do see a lot of crossover. And so I think it's great that you're trying to break down that kind of stereotypical way of looking at sport and trying to bring in these more, just creative and I don't want to say non-competitive, because I feel like there's value to that piece as well, but less threatening, perhaps, way of participating in sport.
When you consider, I mean, often I've said to people that, there's, 0.5% of this country plays professional sport. Wow. So that means that over 99% of us get up every day, and if we do something athletically, it's out of enjoyment of doing it. Now, there's elements of competition that are part of that recreational sport, but sport is recreational by nature. It's a choice, no different than paddling in a canoe or going for a hike. It's the same thing. It's just you're choosing to do it in a form where you're going to work with other people towards a particular goal. And I think that's what gets lost, is that when we think about sport, or when some people think of sport, it is the hyper competitive, win at all cost, environment where sometimes there are negative consequences that come from that environment when the wrong people are in charge. But there's also literally millions of people who've come from that environment and who participated in every day that get all of the healthy benefits from being part of it. And so, as an older person now, I play sport I'm involved in recreational sport, but for 30 odd years of my life, I played at a very competitive level where winning and losing did matter. But to me, they're one and the same. It's just the continuum of it. Which end of it are you? You start at the recreational end and you get to the competitive middle and you finish at the recreational end, because it's sort of like the circle of life. And so I think that if people could see sport more for that, as opposed to this, you're either on one side of it or you're on the other, then I think they would have a greater appreciation for the benefits of it, as opposed to making it a sport versus recreation. It is part of the continuum of recreational opportunities for people to be physically active.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Before we wrap up, I was wondering, is there anything you'd like to mention about the Sport Fund EDI or the Parasport funding that we haven't covered?
Just to encourage people, Gina, to reach out to folks like yourself in your region and the other 5 regions, to go to our website. The information is there. If it's not clear, or even if it is clear and you need more information, take the initiative to reach out to one of our staff. We will get back to you. We will do our best to explain what the funding can do. And as I say, we've got probably just shy of 15 applications in now between the para and the Sport Fund EDI. So groups are starting to take advantage of it, and our staff are doing a great job in shepherding people through the process, and we'll continue to do that.
Love it. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today. It's really a pleasure just to hear your insights on this and to hear what Sport Nova Scotia has been up to. I really am excited just to see how this grows over the next, like you said, year and hopefully future years to come, and the other ways that Sport Nova Scotia supports this work. So thanks for joining us today, and tune in next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's conversation on Influencing the Shift 3.0. Influencing the Shift would not be possible without the Northern Inclusion Access Committee. Its representatives are made up from varying organizations within the northern region of Nova Scotia, including partners from East Hants, Colchester, Pictou, and Cumberland counties. These partners identified a gap in service delivery within the sport and recreation sector when providing opportunities for persons living with disability. We all play an important role in shifting towards a more inclusive sport and recreation sector for individuals with varying abilities. Let's start by influencing the shift.